Welcome everyone to Future Work Scotland. Thank you for joining us for our October session. Just reflecting on the weather and the fact that it's now quite dark here in sunny Scotland. Welcome to you wherever you're joining from. If this is your first time, warm welcome to you. If you've been with us before, welcome back. Great to be doing this session with you. For those who don't know me, I'm Sathpal, Singh, calls me Sath. I'm joined by my co-organiser, Henderson. Just the usual formalities. We have a very simple code of conduct. We simply ask that you be respectful of one another. Want everyone to have a great experience. We will take questions at the end of the session after our speakers delivered our content. So if you do have questions that come up for you along the way, feel free to drop them in the chat. Please prefix some of the cues so we can spot them, and then we'll read them back at the end, and we'll do our usual community shout outs as we bring the session to a close. I'm thrilled to welcome Kanan Tekchandani. Hopefully I made a good job of that to this session. Get a thumbs up. This is a really important session, as I'm sure you'd all agree, so it's great to have so many of you here. This is a growing, subject, something where many of us, I feel we need to continue to educate ourselves. I certainly feel like I do. Many of us are now touched by neurodiversity in many different ways as we grow our understanding of it. Kanan has a lot of experience in this space. She's neurodivergent herself. She's a neurodivergent coach. So we're really thrilled that she's here to do this session with us today. And I feel like there's lots we can all learn. And certainly I'm looking forward to educating myself and learning from some of the various things that she'll share tonight, and also some of the myths that perhaps exist, which I think is often really, really important. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Kanan and look forward to the session. Over to you.
Thanks, Seth. So it's great to be here with you all tonight. So I hope to introduce you to my world and the world of neurodiversity. I want to try and keep it simple and understandable. I don't want to make it a clinical thing. Okay. So I'm going to start by explaining. I consider myself autistic and gifted, so that is neurodivergent. I'll cover a few of the different types of neurotypes tonight, but that is where I sit. And my partner is gifted and has ADHD. My family are also differently wired. My kids, a combination of autism, ADHD, giftedness, and just high sensitivity. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Slides. Bear with me, I'm not fantastic on the tech, as I was saying earlier. Okay, so this is me when I was younger. So when I was younger, I did not know I was neurodivergent. I only got diagnosed in my late 40s. So I'm 47 now. So it was only a few years I actually got diagnosed. So I put this up because I want to demonstrate to you that on the surface, I look quite happy, but I was actually masking. So I was actually pretending to fit in and be like everyone else. So on the outside, I looked like I was bright, I was working hard at school. I was well behaved, quiet, shy. And my teachers would tell me, oh, you can do anything you want to. But on the inside, it was a very different story. I actually felt very confused in the world. I felt anxious. I'd often want to just run away and hide from other people. And sometimes I couldn't speak. So it's what we call situational mutism. And the story in my head was, what's wrong with me? And I just didn't know what it was. So these are some of the stereotypes that we have around neurodivergence. So maybe ADHD, you could see on the left, which is the young child who is maybe very hyperactive, bouncing off the walls, very noisy, maybe doesn't pay attention at school. And then for autism, I've put in these stereotypes that I grew up with, which was Rain Man. and a young child who likes to line up toys. And you might notice there's not really any female stereotypes here, because it was often thought that this was a male thing, a male, what they would classify as a disorder. So tonight I want to challenge that. As I explained, I'm autistic. So I want to clarify, what is this autism spectrum? So it means that the stereotypes I showed you, yes, they are part of the spectrum, but it's not the whole of the spectrum. And rather than it looking like what some people call low functioning or very autistic versus high functioning or mildly autistic, which we don't, in our community, we don't really like the use of those words, because each autistic person is very unique and different. They're a combination of things. So that's why it's more like this, looking at it as sliders. So each person may be at a different point on each of these traits. So some people may be completely nonverbal, whereas for myself, I'm very capable of talking, and people will say I'm quite eloquent. Some of us need to stim, so maybe like flapping the hands or fidgeting with something. Obviously, others maybe not so. A lot of people think that if you're autistic, you can't make eye contact. I personally don't have a problem with that, but obviously there are some people that find that uncomfortable. A lot of us have special interests. We may be quite literal in the way we speak and understand what someone is telling us. So maybe not understanding jokes, for example. Some of us are very fearless. Maybe some of us are a little bit more frightened and like to keep ourselves safe. Sensory overload, that's when we become affected by bright lights, sound, textures, so all sorts of things. But again, it's on a different level for each person. One person may be not affected at all, whereas another person might not be able to wear certain types of clothing and can only wear very comfortable clothing with no labels in. Routines is about giving us comfort. So some of us need more routines and rituals than others to provide comfort and safety in the world. Some of us are very solitary, whereas others actually are very sociable. So it can be quite confusing. And social cues. Some of us understand social cues quite well because we've learned it, just like a skill that we've picked up, whereas others may just not get it. So what I want to make sure you understand is that sometimes people don't actually get diagnosed with autism till much later in life, because the myth is that, oh, you're too smart or too successful. You're too good at talking. You might appear that you have a lot of friends. And again, oh, it only affects boys or children. Again, these are all myths. Everyone grows up into an adult. So talking around the labels and some of the clinical language that might be thrown around. Neurotypical, neurodivergent, neurodiversity, neurodiverse. What does it all mean? So neurotypical refers to the majority of the population and how their brain is wired. So most people's brains are called neurotypical. They're neurotypicals. If you're outside of that majority, then you would be considered neurodivergent. Neurodiversity means that we believe that all these different types of brains are very normal. It's just part of diversity. There's nothing, it's not a disorder. It's just natural variation. Neurodiverse refers to more than one type of brain. So that might be in a group. You have a neurodiverse group of people where you have neurotypicals and neurodivergents, for example. So drilling down a little bit further, if neurodivergent refers to an individual, this is an umbrella term. And then within that, neurodivergent basically means you're differently wired. So you could be differently wired and have what they call autism, or what used to be called Asperger's. Another term under that umbrella is PDA, which is pathological demand avoidance. ASC stands for Autistic Spectrum Condition, and ASD is Autistic Spectrum Disorder. If we move on to ADHD, which is Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, you can also get ADD, which is the same thing, but without the hyperactivity being visible. There's also HSP, which stands for Highly Sensitive Person. This is not something you get diagnosed with, but I find that it falls into the same kind of traits that they experience. And then one which is maybe not so obvious is giftedness, because this is relatively a small part of the population. But if you're gifted, for example, if a child, or if it maybe perhaps yourself were identified as gifted and talented, that is considered neurodivergent because you're on that outside of the main. And then twice exceptional is maybe even less heard of. That basically means you have more than one of these things. So you're gifted, but you also are learning disabled. So you might be gifted, but you also have autism. You might be gifted and also have ADHD. So within that umbrella, there's also terms such as dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, hyperlexia, and lots of other things. Even if you've had, say, a physical trauma, like in a car crash, and your brain is then affected, that also falls under a neurodivergent brain. But what I cover is when someone is born with a certain type of brain. Okay. So there's a lot of language around this that people may not be familiar with. So I just want to throw them in there. You don't have to memorize anything, but I just want you to sort of get familiar with it. So from the outside, what might someone who's neurodivergent look like they're experiencing? So on the outside, it's very common for neurodivergence to be experiencing anxiety and depression and get diagnosed with it. In fact, many of us have been misdiagnosed with anxiety and depression, and the neurodivergence has not been identified. So it can co-occur as a result of not being identified. It also looks like someone who's overwhelmed with just being an adult and just coping in the world, doing things such as chores, cooking, paying the bills. Sometimes it looks like someone who is very emotional or maybe too sensitive and overdramatic. But on the flip side, it could also look like someone who seems to have no emotion and is unempathetic. They may look like they're disorganized, cluttered, or like a scatterbrain, maybe missing appointments and turning up late very frequently. Some of us look like we don't like to socialize, maybe quite aloof, want to spend time on our own. But again, this does not mean everyone who's neurodivergent has these traits, but I want to cover sort of some of the common things. Often they're deemed as, oh, they're too much, they're a bit different, quirky. A more serious thing that can happen is binge eating. So eating disorders like anorexia and bulimia, binge drinking, alcoholism, social media addiction, and doom scrolling. And so a lot of this is as a result of not being identified, diagnosed, and given the right support and understanding. And again, that can also lead to sleep problems, broken relationships because there's misunderstanding between the two different types of brains, for example. And when it all gets too much, you may see meltdowns, which might look like someone literally throwing things across the room, screaming and shouting. It could be a shutdown where they turn inwards, they don't talk, they don't respond. And it can lead to eventually burnout, which is, you get burnout anyway from overworking, but you can get burnout from being neurodivergent, just trying to cope with fitting into a neurotypical world. So I've also mentioned here the double empathy problem. And this just, for me, all it means is that we're speaking different languages. So a neurodivergent person and a neurotypical person often misunderstand each other. So to me, it's like they don't speak the same language. It's not that they don't like each other. It's not that they're not speaking, but think there's often misinterpretations of the meaning. So on the inside, what's actually going on, as I explained from the first slide, I was masking. So a lot of neurodivergent people mask. What does masking mean? It means we pretend to be something we're not. We pretend to be like everyone else so that we fit in, we're accepted, and we feel like we belong, because belonging is very important to any human. So masking also means that we try to follow the social etiquette, even though we might not actually understand what's appropriate in a social situation. What can we say and what can we not say? It doesn't come naturally to a lot of us. And so it's very effortful doing this masking. And what that can lead to is physical exhaustion and physical tension actually in the muscles in the body. It can also lead to mental exhaustion. So because you're constantly thinking, okay, what should I be saying? What is appropriate? And kind of checking in on yourself and judging whether you're doing it right or not. You're always sort of on edge. It can be emotionally exhausting as well, because if you can't be your real self, then often people don't really know the real you, and relationships, friendships may not be as deep and meaningful as you actually want them to be. And we all have emotional needs. And if we don't have that connection, we can feel very run down, and leading to the loneliness and isolation, which can lead to things like the anxiety and depression. Hypersensitivity, this refers to sensory sensitivities. As I was explaining, some of us don't like bright lights. We can't stand strong smells or certain smells, certain fabrics. So when you're hypersensitive, everything just feels heightened. All the input from your environment can affect you much more than everyone else. So other people may not be bothered, but if you have to tolerate something that is uncomfortable, can you imagine what that's like, trying to do that all through the day in your work environment, and maybe only feeling safe enough and comfortable enough to relax when you get home. So the environment is one thing. Part of the environment is the people. And I've mentioned criticism here because there's a thing that happens called rejection sensitive dysphoria. And that means that the neurodivergent person is actually very sensitive to being criticized and being judged. And they might even feel it viscerally in their body. So it's much more so than maybe an average person. So even though you may think that wasn't something big, they may receive it very painfully. And especially if that can accumulate over a lifetime and lead to things like low self-esteem and the depression again. There's often hypervigilance, as in within the nervous system, we're often on high alert because we're not quite sure what we're supposed to be doing. The outside world may feel unsafe, so your nervous system may be always on the go. That also gets affected by trauma often, and it's not unusual to have PTSD. So what I'm referring to here in terms of trauma is not what you might think like when someone goes to war, but I'm talking more little t trauma that is constant, daily, and maybe small. Often there's relational trauma, which is when, the people that love us or the people that we work with don't understand us. And over time, that can really affect us even in ourselves. I've mentioned the misdiagnosis and the confusion. So you can imagine if you grow up not knowing and not understanding how you operate and how you experience the world, sometimes you can feel a little bit like going mad, and it's very confusing because no one else seems to get it. And so you might think, you might feel like you're being gaslit if other people are saying, no, it's fine, you must be imagining things, or you're being too sensitive. And then I've lastly mentioned hypermobility, which is not something that happens to everyone, but it's very common actually. So having hypermobile joints and maybe getting injury, pain in the joints. So pain is often something that we experience as well, these lax joints. Okay. So they're the problems, but with problems, these traits also comes great gifts. So it's almost like two sides of the same coin. So when you are differently wired, we're often greater innovation and out of the box problem solving, because we have a very creative brain. We think differently. We see things that other people don't see. We're able to hyper focus. So hyper focus is when you can kind of like tunnel and focus on getting a task done, and everything else just kind of gets forgotten and blurred. The problem with that is sometimes we forget to eat, forget to drink, so we don't necessarily take care of ourselves. But the great thing is we'll get a job done. If you give us a job, we'll get it done, and probably much quicker than other people, because of this intensity that we have on the project. There can be a capacity for complexity that other people don't quite get, and they are not able to understand how you're doing it, because it's a natural gift that you've been given. You can also be great at having detailed, in-depth knowledge about your maybe favored special interests. It may be that you're very good at analyzing problems, data, finding patterns. So my first job before becoming a coach was actually as a buyer, and part of that is about identifying patterns so that you can sell more of the stuff that is working, right, and making more profit. So it can be really good for business if we can identify patterns. We can be very quick thinkers as well, and we work well under pressure. This isn't everyone, but I'm just saying some of us have this ability. We can be very resilient and determined, because when you go into the school system, for example, and you're already having to work maybe twice as hard as everyone around you just to keep up and fit in and blend in, you can imagine how much strength and resilience that gives you. You've had lots of practice. I've put exacting standards. Another way you could see this is perfectionism. So again, perfectionism can be good, but it can also be bad. Depends what you're using it for. And then I've put kind and compassionate, because I want to kind of break this myth that a lot of people think if you're autistic, for example, that you don't understand emotions and you don't have empathy. But what I've found from lived experience is that actually they're super kind, they're super compassionate, but sometimes the only way they can cope with their emotions is to kind of be very blank about it, so they can protect themselves, basically. So, but some of us also can't feel emotions, and this has got a name. This is called alexithymia. So it actually is a thing as well. But I want to show you, you know, the broadness of what it can be like. So it's a complex area. So I wanted to put this Venn diagram up to show you how complex it is and why so many people don't get diagnosed. More and more kids are getting diagnosed at school, and even more and more adults are getting diagnosed now. If you go to the GP because you think you might be neurodivergent, there's a huge waiting list. So more and more people are beginning to recognize the traits that people are talking about. So I'm not going to go through the whole lot, but from a sort of high level, you can see how giftedness, it's not considered a disorder, but it's very relevant because it affects how you experience the world and how you interact with people. But it does cross over with autism and ADHD. You can see there's many overlaps. And so if we just look at the middle section where they all overlap, you can see that emotional sensitivity occurs across all three of them. The sensory differences also exist. Being interest driven. So I actually like to think of that as more, sometimes we get very bored by something that's not interesting and we find it hard to make ourselves do the work. So if we can tie it to an interest, it's very helpful because you have a natural motivation. Unique ways of learning. So some of us, for example, don't learn so well from reading and writing, but we might be great at picking things up very quickly through watching a video or listening. Intense curiosity, again, that intensity is often apparent to other people. That can cause problems in itself, but it's also great because, you know, we'll go down these rabbit holes and we'll find things out that other people haven't figured out. Executive function difficulties. So that refers to the ability of your brain to take a task, break it down, plan ahead, organize it in steps, and actually look at timings to make sure that it's done on time. A lot of us actually struggle with that. So this is not like an intelligence thing. This is more of a planning and execution and completing the task problem. And it's because part of our brain that handles that is not as well developed. Divergent and creative thinking, I've mentioned, and then asynchronous development. So what this means is someone, for example, someone might appear to be pretty smart at school, but then they might seem, even as an adult, sorry, but they might seem like they are really bad at paying the bills. They might be unable to be emotional with their loved ones. So people can misinterpret this as something that's been done on purpose. But actually it's not. It's because some of us actually develop slower in certain areas than other areas. So intellectually might be very advanced, but emotionally it's very common for autistic people to be 2 or 3 years behind their peers. Okay. Because I have a special interest in giftedness, and I don't think it's covered by many people, I want to cover it a little bit more tonight. So giftedness sounds like, well, it's a good thing, right? It's a gift. This isn't true. It's with giftedness comes its own set of problems. Some people don't even like the term gifted. So even if they're smart, they might not resonate with the term gifted because it can be seen as a bit stigmatized. You don't want to stick out maybe when you're at school. And also it sounds a little bit like you're showing off. But in reality, if you're gifted, it's also referred to as having high potential. Other terms are you have a rainforest mind. So it's a very rich mind with lots of sub areas. Another term is mentally super efficient. So traditionally, this is about IQ. So you can get tested for your IQ. You can go to Mensa, you can go to a psychologist. And so traditionally, giftedness is about having high IQ. Generally, we're talking over 130, but it does change. So don't take that as a fact, but it's about 130. Within giftedness, the way I've been taught about it, it's not just about your intellectual IQ. There are other areas of intelligence that may get missed. So you may be emotionally intelligent. You may be creatively intelligent. So that's things like painting, singing, writing. You may have sensual intelligence. So that's like a sensory thing where you, let's say someone is very good at identifying certain smells, right? So that can be very good in certain jobs, as you can imagine. Physical intelligence. So a lot of athletes, perhaps, dancers, this is their gift. They have a physical intelligence. And then another one is existential intelligence, which you may not have thought about, but it's, around the meaning of life, purpose, why are we here, and having this ability to understand and question these areas in great depth. And the reason why I've put a zebra on there is to illustrate that it's kind of like not a logo, but it represents gifted people because we're often trying to blend in with our peers. So we may be suppressing our true selves. And so we have these two parts of us. So often the zebra is used to represent giftedness. So these people are all considered gifted. So rather than just talking about facts and figures, to try and bring it to you on a more relatable level, I've put their IQs on there. Now, these are just taken off estimates. These are not facts, but it should give you a bit of an idea. So people like Madonna, 140, Arnold Schwarzenegger, 135, Matt Damon, 160, I'm not going to say all the other figures, but you can see these people are considered gifted. So they have a high capacity for complexity and speed of thinking, speed of creativity, etc. So I wonder if any of you are surprised to know about this, about these celebrities. Okay, so going into a little bit more of the stats. Giftedness comes in different levels. So most people think, oh, if you're gifted, you're a genius like Einstein, but this is not true. So Einstein would be profoundly gifted, be 116 plus. But we have mildly gifted, moderately gifted, and highly gifted. Most people don't go and get themselves tested, so they probably wouldn't know where they are. When I got identified, it wasn't through a test. Often we identify because we meet someone who is also gifted, and you're on the same page. It's like you're a radar for each other. You just get each other. So I find that more useful than kind of expecting people to go and do a Mensa test, for example. So I sit within the moderately gifted section because I did do a Mensa test in the end after I was told that I may be gifted. That means that I can kind of flex between talking to people who are on either side of me. So I can very comfortably move towards working with mildly gifted people and maybe average, but also highly gifted. I would struggle at profoundly gifted because the gap of understanding is so great. So even within gifted people, they may feel misunderstood because you need to be kind of within the same area to be on the same page and understand each other, because it's more like a capacity thing. It's not through not wanting to, you're just not able to. In terms of the worldwide population, how many people are neurodivergent? Again, I think these figures are always changing. So I've just gone for what I could find, which is with ADHD, it's 6.8% according to the ADD Resource Centre. There's around 1% of the population who are autistic, and there is about 3 to 5% of the population who are gifted. So it's not a huge part of the population, but obviously relevant because, you know, we are out there in the world, we're working, we're interacting with everyone, we're an important part of society. So it's important to recognize these different ways of thinking and being in the world. So I'm going to try and explain to you a little bit more about twice exceptionality. As I said, if you're gifted, you would be considered to have advanced skills and abilities. So on the bell curve, you would be the top sort of sliver of the population. However, when you're twice exceptional, you're also learning disabled, so the ADHD or autism, in this case that I'm talking about. And that means you're lagging in certain skills and abilities. So when you're twice exceptional, you can see you have these extremes of challenge and extremes of potential. And this can be really confusing for people around you and for yourself. Because people will think, if you can do this so well, why can you not do that? It's so simple. And often it's more that the complex things are easy for us and the simple things are actually a lot harder. So it's a bit of a paradox. These are just a couple more images to sort of illustrate that twice exceptionality, because it's not often talked about in my experience. It's very, it's not so well known. So again, you can see exceptionality 1 is that high ability, and then the other exceptionality is some form of disability or learning challenge. And again, you can see with the Venn diagram, it's the same kind of thing. So the problem, as I was saying, is that if you have these intellectual gifts, you are able to mask the challenges and disabilities very well. So you can go through your whole life not realizing that you're struggling with something, and you might just assume everyone struggles with it. But actually, it's because you are smart enough. You've come up with coping mechanisms and other ways of dealing with your challenges to hide them. Other times, your challenges and disabilities may completely cover up your gifts. So often people think they're not smart. In fact, they go through life with this internal kind of imposter syndrome feeling, because perhaps when they were younger, they were seen as average, maybe labeled lazy, stupid, and not living up to their potential. And yet there's so much potential there just waiting to be released. So this page is the page that I wanted to show, because the stereotypes I showed you first, this is the reality of what an autistic adult actually looks like. In the last few years, a lot of adults have been identified. So I don't know if you recognize some of these people, know their names, but they're quite well known. Elon came out on Saturday Night Live as being Asperger's. So we don't use Asperger's as a diagnosis anymore in the UK. They now call it autism level 1, but it's the same thing. So you can see he's very, very smart. He's got a very high IQ. So he's what I would call twice exceptional. Anthony Hopkins, Melanie Sykes, Daryl Hannah, Sia. These are people who've realized only late in life, wow, they're autistic. So it's never too late to understand yourself and become self-aware. And a lot of people say, it's now made sense of my life, why I had anxiety, why I had depression, why I had so many broken relationships. And it's so important for us to understand why things are happening to us, so we can do something about it going forward. We can make different choices. Everyone on this slide has ADHD, and they are still super successful. So often people think if they've got ADHD, it's going to hold them back in life. But actually, when you use these gifts and you believe in yourself and you have the right scaffolding support for the challenges, you can make a great difference to the people in the world. You can make people very happy. You can inspire them. You can make them healthier. So it's really important to not just think of it as a disorder. I think it's important to see it as just a different way of thinking and a different way of expressing yourself. And that is still valuable. So this slide is the final slide. This is about how can you help? How can you help other people in your life who might be neurodivergent, whether they know it or not? And as I say, a lot of people don't realize till late in life because it's been misunderstood. So the first step I would say is become aware, educate yourself. So by coming to this talk, you've learned a little bit more. You've got a little bit of the language around it and ways to identify maybe some of the different neurodivergences. That means you can signpost someone if they've been struggling with something like anxiety, depression, ill health, and they've been struggling for all their life. It could be that they've been misdiagnosed, and you could signpost them, and that might actually liberate them from their problems. If it's someone at work, how can you make the most of that partnership, that teamwork? Well, you can create safety and acceptance. When you understand how someone's brain is wired differently, and you understand their intention, and you maybe stop and consider what they're actually trying to do, rather than assuming that, for example, often people think we're being too blunt. But actually, maybe now you'll go, they can just see the answer very quickly, and they have a need to tell you that straight away. It's not that they're trying to be blunt and hurtful. Help them identify your neurodivergent people in your life and identify their passions, because if you can identify what they're interested in, their special interests, then you can engage with them much better. Because as I was saying, if it's boring for us, a lot of us become disengaged. We're not bringing our full selves, our full attention, our full abilities to the problem. So if you can engage them in the right way, using preferred communication and what they might be interested in, that's a great way for you to unleash some of that untapped potential. Okay. So it wasn't the final slide. So this is to say, actually, we're all part of the same world. We're all part of this neurodiversity. If you're a neurotypical, you're still part of this neurodiversity, because we are all just different types of brains. Every single person is uniquely wired anyway. It's just that some of us are more wired differently than others. But we all have this potential within us, and we're all entitled to make the most of it. And with each other's support, we can do that. And working as a team, we can create more harmony, we can achieve more success, whether it's in our personal life or whether it's in business. But it's important to understand that there is maybe a gift here that has not been realized and not made maximum use of. So keep your eyes open and be open to the possibilities of how you could work with each other. This is just the final page. This is me and my website if you want to find out a little bit more about neurodiversity, relationships, and well-being. Okay, so I'll stop the share there.
Thanks, Kanan. That was great. Yeah, really informative. Great session. Thank you. Questions are coming in now, so let me go through and start with the first one that came in and work through them for you. And Maria was asking, yeah, I think I was puzzled with this as well. You had a slide where you were talking, you mentioned 2E. I think it was unclear for what 2E was. Twice exceptional, the Matthews answered it.
Yeah, it's a shortened term because it's quite long.
Yes. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Matthew. And BG's asking, how do we separate out the outsideness of not being from a community to having neurodiversity, e.g. someone who moves to the U. Oh, my screen just moved there. I've lost it now. Someone who moves to the UK and doesn't understand the social norms.
In terms of that person's personal experience, so if they understood the social norms in their home country, that would
outsideness of not being from a community to having neurodiversity, someone who if someone's not, it reads like if someone's not from here, how do we, I guess, understand that rather than perhaps it being a neurodivergent thing?
Right. Well,
can I clarify? Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't sure if we were allowed to speak.
Yeah, you can, absolutely.
It's just so so for a lot of maybe Black people or people from ethnic minorities, they often don't get diagnosed because people put down their differences to the fact that they come from a different community. And then, if you move to the UK, you might understand your social norms at your home country, but you don't understand the ones in the new country. And it's how do you separate that out? How do you know that? Is it that they just don't understand the social norms because they're from somewhere else, or they have neurodiversity?
I've kind of got lived experience with this myself, being autistic and having moved from Northern Ireland to like the north of Scotland, and like Northern Ireland's like a very religious place to like compared to Scotland, and it's very conservative compared to the liberal Scotland, and like that was one of the big things that delayed my people understanding me, like, and I was autistic, was because of they thought it was maybe just a social cultural issue. So like it is probably a hard one to navigate, but I guess it's more about then trying to learn about their culture and understanding what part is their culture and what part is traits of autism or like other neurodivergency. Sorry.
Did that help answer the question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to that person that responded. That was very useful.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for chipping in there. I think the next question is from yourself. Is it Brona? How do you pronounce your name? I don't want to get that wrong.
It's Brona. The CH is silent.
Brona. Okay. Thank you. So Bruno's asking, apologies, but I was informed that people with Tourette's come under being neurodivergent. May I ask how bipolar is a neurodivergency and not a mental condition? Or is it that often women in particular are being misdiagnosed with having bipolar or borderline personality disorder over a neurodivergent condition?
My understanding, and I don't diagnose people, but this is my understanding of it, that bipolar is also considered a neurodivergency. But often people who are autistic do often get misdiagnosed with bipolar. It's yeah, and borderline.
There's more here. I'm going to try to get through. It's quite long. Empathy. I have a theory that, for example, people with ASD may struggle with recognizing how people feel. Is that when we are young people, I say I am fine when clearly not. Okay.
Yeah.
And keeps going on, but people with ASD can still sense you're not okay. And everyone's still whole life has told them that it is what fine looks like for them, so it can cause confusion. For example, those who are literal thinkers.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense because it's kind of like the unwritten, unspoken etiquette, right? Is to say I'm fine. That's the etiquette. But for people who are very truthful and logical, you're kind of like, well, why are you saying you're fine when you're not? So it doesn't make sense to us. But it's that social thing where people say, yeah, I'm fine, because that's what the general conversation goes, isn't it? People don't generally just open up fully with their emotions, their real emotions. So it is very confusing, yeah.
There's one here from Nick. I'm not sure what it's in reference to, but you'll probably know, Kanan. And Nick's asking, what is signposting? So one of the slides.
So that's just directing them to maybe a resource, a website that is about one of these topics or one of these types of neurodivergent traits and ways of being in the world. Because, as I say, the main thing for me is that people understand themselves better. And it's like it can be a lifelong search, and it can be very confusing when you don't understand how you're operating and how you're experiencing the world. And if you can signpost someone and they can validate their experience, that brings a lot of inner peace and saves them a lot of that mental health problems that we end up having.
Thanks. A few folk are asking if we'll be sharing the slides. Will that be okay to share the slides if you get them back to myself or Donald? We'll share them. Sure. Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Thank you. There's one here from Hazel. Hazel's asking, okay, are there any companies that are accommodating to neurodivergent people? In my own experience, having ASD, it seems to be tick box in most companies, but not so much genuinely accommodating. Okay.
Yes, I would agree with that. There's a lot of people don't want to share their diagnosis because they're worried about being treated differently. Because even if a company says they support and accommodate, they may not genuinely. So sometimes it's, they're just saying it, and a lot of us are fearful of exposing ourselves and making ourselves vulnerable. Are there companies that accommodate? Yes, I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I can certainly, I know that there's some sort of agencies that will help recruit specifically neurodivergent people. So I can dig those out if you would like. I know that Barclays, I saw recently from a colleague that Barclays has redone their office environment to suit neurodivergent people. So there's lots of sensory accommodations and changes in the design that they've done, and there's quiet spaces. So I think as more and more people are talking about it and understanding it, there are changes being made. It is probably slow, but I think we're getting there. I think there's movement. is it a broad thing? I think a lot of people are talking about it, whether they're actually, if it's just lip service, yeah.
That is a common topic actually around a lot of this stuff. Our organisations, is it tick boxes? Are they genuinely trying to create more accommodating environments, to use the terms? Yeah, I've heard all this stuff about that. There's another one here from Nick. Okay, more general one. Can you please name some useful resources for learning social skills and social cues in the UK for neurodivergent? Yeah, that's a good one.
Social
Somebody can
skills,
help with it.
cues.
Mm.
I don't know any off the top of my head, and part of the reason for that is because my belief is that a lot of us have had to already learn to socialize like a neurotypical, and there's a part of me that says, well, neurotypicals need to come and meet us halfway and understand how we communicate. So I can't name any social skills trainings to you, but I can find out if that would be helpful. Yeah, let me know.
I don't know if it's a question in there, but Jack referred to himself as neurofantastic.
Oh, I love
I
it.
really like.
Yeah. Yes. Amazing.
Maybe we'll present it with the info. Okay, right. Okay. Thanks, Jack. George is asking, men's advised to be assessed alternatively. If neurodivergent, twice exceptional, etc., by a psychologist instead of having your IQ, yeah, Mensa directly, any advice or comment?
Yeah, I think you're asking where could you get like a clinical assessment, is that right? So yeah, there is I think they call it a neuropsych, where they put you through a battery of tests to check your cognition. I haven't done it myself, but I have spoken to clinics that do this. So yeah, that you would want to go for a neuropsych test, and they would test for things like IQ, they would test for ADHD and autism, and I'm not sure what else, but yeah, they can run a battery of tests basically.
Just while I'm shifting through for other questions, I just want to thank everyone for their contributions, by the way. It's been really good. So a lot of additional comments and support from everybody, supporting other comments and questions in the group and in the chat. So thank you. Okay, this is one for you, personal one really, from Maria. Kanan, now you're self-employed, but before, when you discovered you were neurodivergent, did you tell your employer?
Me? I didn't know. So I didn't know. So basically I tolerated and made myself fit in because I didn't know any better. So I couldn't even advocate for myself when I didn't know. And that's why I say, please be aware and signpost people, because we could stop a lot of this unnecessary suffering, that we have to tolerate certain environments and ways of being treated just because we didn't realize that we're wired differently. Yeah.
But I have I mean, when you this is Maria. When you discovered this, you were already self-employed.
Yes.
Okay, that answers the question. Okay, and do you think that it's better to tell your employer, for example, now, do you advise to tell your employer, because there's so much stigma? It's complicated. It can backfire at us.
Yeah, I think you have to take it on a case-by-case basis, because each company really does have a different culture.
Yes.
And also it depends if the person themselves want to let people know. Maybe they don't want to let people know. That's so it's a very personal choice, but you also have to take into account the employer and whether you think it will negatively affect you, or whether actually, yes, they would be supportive and they would then be more accommodating. So I think you have to do a little bit of research around your company, scope. That's what I usually tell my clients to scope out, go to diversity, equity and inclusion, maybe talk to a few other people that maybe already have kind of come out and see what their experience is. But it's tricky to navigate because there's no
Yes.
guarantee. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, can I jump in?
Thanks for the question. Well, yeah, you can. Of course you can.
Maria, so I've had experience both positive and negative, which Kanan will probably explain. She's probably experienced it as well. So my advice is to look out for any staff networks that may be in the workplace if you're employed, and reach out to them, and you'll probably be able to gauge from speaking to others that whether or not you want to go down that route or not. Sorry.
Okay. So you did it. You did it.
In some places I have, and in some places I haven't, and I'll be honest, both have worked out badly. So
Yeah, I think the same. I
yeah.
read just a small comment is I think it's important for statistics about this, and it's a nice knowledge to have. It's like I have read that people with ADHD are 3 times more likely to be self-employed. So maybe we are not, because we don't like to follow rules. So this is why we need to be the entrepreneurs, and actually the entrepreneurs are neurodivergent people. I believe this also.
Yes, I think the stats are there. A lot of entrepreneurs, because we can control our environment, we control our decisions, and we're not told by other people how we should.
Yes. Yeah, sure.
Is there data that supports that? I think that's fascinating.
I have seen it. I can't remember where though, so I can't back it up. But I think it's something like a third of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I read it actually. This is, in fact, I read we are 3 times more likely as also to get divorced. We are 3 times more likely to get divorced, and we are 3 more likely to be entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Same side of the coin, right? Same
Yes.
coin, different sides.
Yes.
Good enough. Fantastic. Well, thanks for your contribution there. Mara's got another one for us here. Okay. What is a strategic intervention coach, and how does it help with 2E people? So
is that referring to my training? So strategic intervention is not specific to neurodiversity. Strategic intervention is so I trained with Tony Robbins and Chloe Madanes, and their training is called strategic intervention, and it's about basically they've pulled together their most powerful strategies that help people overcome like common life challenges. They say that there's only so many challenges that we have in life, but there's almost like an infinite number of solutions. So we've been given the biggest strategies that they've found to work to help people change their lives for the better. And it's like a holistic approach. We also take into account not just the person, but their environment. So it's kind of like a 360. We bring in all the resources from outside as well. So it's kind of based on systems thinking. It's about creating peace and harmony. So I just found it very relevant to how I apply it to the people I work with, because it's about helping us to understand ourselves inside, but also how we operate with people around us within an ecosystem. Hope that makes sense.
I've got another one here from John. It's quite long, so I'm going to work through it as best I can. What are the risks and benefits of describing people who are wired equally, differently from neurotypical, but in opposite directions? That seems to be the first part. Does that make sense?
Could you say that again?
What are the risks and benefits of describing people who are wired equally, differently from the neurotypical, but in opposite directions? Is John still on the call? Do you want to?
Yeah, sorry, I added as a comment saying they're both neurotypical, but they're neurotypical because they're at different ends of the tail. So, is it helpful, or is it potentially confusing to take ways of differing from the norm, but in opposite directions, and give them a singular category of neurodiverse, even though technically that would be correct?
So I don't think I'm understanding fully your question. Let me just give me a minute to process it. Are you referring to 2E, or are you talking about I don't know, say autism and ADHD?
Well, I guess you could use autism and ADHD as an example. If if one is like an excess of lateral and chaotic thinking, and the other is represented by a higher level of kind of linear and systematic thinking, then they might both be differences from an average, but they might be differences such that what the best advice or the best solutions and the best accommodations for one might not be those that work for the other, for instance. And so kind of drawing a ring around the circle and saying everything outside that ring is, it's true that they're equally neurodiverse, but beyond that, what's in common?
So I think because it is a spectrum, I hope it's not too literal. I'm not sure if I'm understanding this correctly, but yeah, it's not like to me, it's not like a black and white thing. It's a spectrum. So there's gradients. It's not even a straight line where one person is at one end and another person is the other. I always believe that, as I say, everyone is unique. Everyone has strengths and challenges. But for example, the 2E, they are more extreme strengths and more extreme challenges. And that has to be recognized because it does come with a different experience of the world.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question? I'm not sure I'm answering it correctly there.
No, yes, thanks.
Okay.
I'm just working through. There's lots of great comments and follow-ups in the chat, so I think I can share the chat if folk are able to get the chat, because there are links and things folk have shared. So thanks for everyone for contributing. I don't know if there's any further questions. I don't think I missed any. Well, I got yours in the end. I don't know, we're still on the call. Just my chat window's quite small. Also. Yeah, just people sharing links. I mean, is there any other questions anybody wants to unmute and share? Hi.
I had a question about why is addiction more common for people with neurodivergence / those who are gifted? Is this to do with experiencing more trauma, like burnout, or like is like, I don't know how to word this, but the window of resilience, like our window of resilience is very different. So like we're more likely to be pushed through the stages of hypo and hyper.
Yeah. So I think the answer to that would be if you're not getting the right support, and it's taking a lot from you physically, mentally, and emotionally. For example, if you're at home and your home is not supportive of your specific sensitive nervous system, that means your body has to tolerate and put up with something that is, it's kind of like constantly being bombarded. And so this is like an underlying thing that's always there. So you might not realize it, but it's actually negatively affecting you, and that can cause that anxiety and the depression, because you just can't figure out what is it, because you might think it's something obvious because other people are affected by your environment, the same environment, and the ones that build the resilience, I think that's a lot about your own capacity, your own strength and willpower and mindset, but also the people around you, because if they are attuned to your needs, they probably would have adapted the environment to suit you better. And so you've got a better environment, better baseline in terms of your nervous system anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. I don't see any other questions. As I say, lots of nice follow-ups and folks sharing other links and bits of content, etc. So that's fantastic. If I have missed a question, feel free to raise your hand and jump in. But other than that, are there any other questions from the group? I don't see any others in the chat, so I think I've missed them. But yeah, I'd encourage folks to.
I just wanted to also add about the anxiety and the depression, that I think a lot of it is caused by the way we perceive ourselves, because we're using what other people are mirroring back. And if they're mirroring back, you're not doing things right and there's something wrong with you, then that becomes our internal, our self-talk. And then you can be really down on yourself and doubt yourself. So that does lead to all the mental health problems as well. So it's not just the physical environment, but as I say, how people look at you, how people treat you, what they say to you, all that, it accumulates and leads to these problems. If you think, yeah, I'm not quite accepted and I'm not good enough.
Can I also add to that? I'm currently a social work student on placement, and I had to write for my first piece on my effective is how much I've had to then work on. I realized after my first few weeks, I was masking so hard to other people, it was causing me to be really burnt out by the time I was getting home. I had just no energy. I couldn't do any coursework. I couldn't do anything because I was masked, and because my placement as well is particularly hard. I'm working with people with addictions. You're masking so many different personalities in a day, and it's really difficult.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that, and it's so common. So when you mask like that and you're exhausted and you can't cope, that's why a lot of people turn, they seek comfort, and that's why people end up comfort eating and drinking, because it just relieves some of that, that unhappiness. And even neurotypical people do this, right? But because we are more vulnerable, I would say, because we don't realize that we are kind of having to struggle through an environment that doesn't suit us. So we're more likely to end up seeking comfort and relief through these maybe unhealthy behaviors, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, great. Somebody's dropped it. I think I don't see any more questions, so I think that's good. If there aren't any, I'm happy to start bringing the session to a close. There's one coming in. We will share the chat because there has been a lot of really good content shared and lots of links for things, and folk have probably missed some of the stuff. So I think we were thinking we would do that. And just lots of praise for you, Kanan. So I think with that, I'm gonna start wrapping it up. We're getting to 1:15 the hour, so I think that's good. So really informative session. So thank you. Lots of great stuff. I think it leaves us all with lots to think about and follow up with, and deepen our own understanding. And I think that's really important. That's why it's so great to do these types of sessions, because I think a lot of us are trying to learn more and educate ourselves and become better informed. So we can all support one another, as we like to do here, and I think others are doing as well, to create more inclusive workplaces.
Maru has a hand up.
Maru has his hand up. Maru can always be relied on to come in late with a question. Can't see you. Feel free, Maru. Don't know where you are. I can't see you on my screen. Where are you, man?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I have a question, Kanan. It's a very general question. You've been coaching people when you were divergent. In terms of career, what are the most common challenges that you work on with them? They share with you that they need help from you with.
Did you
professionally?
Professionally. So I tend to work in their personal relationships, because it's about communication and self-advocating at work. because this misunderstanding is where things go wrong. So I try to help them to understand what the other person may be trying to achieve or what their meaning is. So it's difficult to explain because it's very specific to the challenge that that particular person is experiencing. So what I'm doing is kind of trying to break that double empathy problem. I'm trying to translate what the neurodivergent person is thinking and perceiving, and then trying to explain to them what the neurotypical person is trying to achieve and is thinking and trying to convey, so that there's less misunderstanding, and then it sort of smooths the relationship more. And I just find that seems to be what people are needing help with, and also maybe advocating, for the sensory stuff. Maybe they don't know what they need, and I can help them a little bit with that. But it is very individual, so it's difficult to be general about it.
Did that help, Mara? Did that answer the question?
Yeah, of course. I knew the question would be tough to answer. It would have been very specific, but the communication aspect, the double empathy aspect, is exactly what was my experience. That's a key thing. It's like there is a glass wall, a glass sphere surrounding you as an ADHD person in any other group, and a heap bombardment, constant radiation, killing you of misunderstandings and judgments and preconceived ideas and tons of microaggression.
Yes.
Messages that come at you. It's very easy to lose track and lose sight of what you're even doing this whole thing for. So but I had a follow-up question, but I forgot it. Typical ADHD. But are there sets of tools that you like to use to work with people? For example,
yeah. Actually, so when someone asked about how does strategic intervention help. So strategic intervention, one of the frameworks that we use in that is the universal 6 human needs. And so I find that super helpful, because if you can understand what someone needs and understand that if you can help them meet their need, they're going to bond to you, they're going to have a good relationship with you. So when I help someone understand what maybe their boss or their colleague is needing from them, and then helping them come up with a vehicle that they're comfortable with to provide that need, then everyone's happy, because you've improved the relationship, you've given the other person what they want. So it's a win-win. But you need to, as I say, you have to I find you have to break down the situation and kind of analyze it and problem solve it. But yeah, 6 human needs. If you know what someone wants and you can give them what they want, that's a great way to build relationship. And it also means that, then they treat you differently. They are more accommodating. They'll give you what you need because they've already got what they need.
Yeah. Robbins always says you only get from people what you give them, what you put into them. You can't. But if you don't even know what to get, so you don't. So what you're saying makes total sense to me, because it's like an incredibly complex machinery, and you have to play and tweak at a million different parts. Typically, a complex system.
Yeah.
And so the other thing that fascinated me in what you were saying was the impact of the environment at home. So typically, your flat or your house on your constant state of mind, state of being, self-image, all these things. And that's something that I found out for myself. I've written several articles myself. So could you give me examples of what certain aspects of one's environment at home can have on state of mind?
So it depends on
generally. I mean, anything.
It depends on your unique sensitivity, sensory needs, or you might call it like a sensory diet. So personally, I need a very minimal space, because I take in so much. It's like data. What I see is like visual data, so that can become very overwhelming, and it makes my brain work harder. So for me, I need a very minimal environment. I need things in it that are not bright and brash. I need very sort of low key, low arousal lighting, for example. I need nice candles. I can't stand strong perfumed chemically smells. Fabrics have to be really soft. Even my clothes have to be soft, because if there's any level of discomfort, it takes some of your energy and attention away from what you're trying to do. Now, if you look at one of my kids and my partner, they're more sensory seeking. They need stuff to maybe jump on. They need stuff to fidget with. They need loud music or fast music. So, and they might want bright light. So it's very individual. It's about knowing your own sensory profile and supporting that individually. And if you live in a house with someone, it takes a bit of compromise, and that's why it's important to know your own profile, because then you can explain to someone else. You're not just kind of being annoying. So if I say, can you turn the noise down, and it's really low, they now understand it's because it's too much for me. It's too overwhelming. Whereas before they might just thought I'm being annoying, because there's, it's not that loud. So what feels loud for one person might not be that loud for another, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Thanks, applause from Martin. Great. I think I will start to close it off there, because I think you've answered an incredible number of questions, Kanan. It's been really, really insightful, and as I said, lots of great contributions in the chat from everyone. So thank you to your good self for the session. We'll get the slides circulated, and thank you to all of you for supporting another great session this evening with your contributions, your participation. Matthew, I did see your offer, so we'll pick up with you and look at our program, what's coming up, but also to plug your work, right? So where you're a fellow BCS specialist group chair, you chair our neurodiversity group, so that's fantastic. So well done to you and the rest of your team for doing that. So if you are interested in other opportunities to learn more about these important topics and subject matter, then Matthew's the chair of the Neurodiversity Specialist Group, the BCS. I'm sure he runs a number of other great talks and sessions and events as well. So look that up as well. You'll find more information about that on the BCS site, www.bcs.org. So there I plugged it for you. So so yeah, just to close out, penultimate session next month. It's around about the middle of the month. That's a fascinating session. I'm sure it will be with Noel Warnell, and he'll be talking about increasing your throughput book. So most of us are readers and probably buy more books. You can see some of just a very small selection of some of my collection behind me. And again, we don't get to them all, do we? So he's got a great talk lined up about how you can improve your throughput and get through around about 50 plus books a year. So we're really looking forward to that. And we have one final session for you. It's not quite live yet, and that promises to be an excellent finale to the year. So we're not going to give too much away at the moment, but do look out for that. And then we'll start creating our program for 2024. So I can't believe I'm saying that 2023 is nearly come to an end. So thank you all again for joining us. If there aren't any other shout outs for meetups or events that you know of coming up that you want to make everybody aware of, now's your chance in the remaining few minutes. Anything anybody wants to call out?
Somebody posted an Eventbrite link to some event in, I don't know where it is, in Scotland.
In the chat.
In the chat. Yes.
I didn't see that, Maru. The chat's been a busy place this evening. That's fine. Yeah, you can share it if you want there. As I say, we'll share the chat. I see it now. And remember the first understanding in supporting autistic well-being. That one. That looks good. So yeah, there is a link in there. As I say, we'll export the chat and share it round once we share the slides and the recording for this session. So don't worry about that. But yeah, thanks again, everyone, for joining. Really good session. Appreciate the contribution, participation, and yeah, just look after yourselves. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening.
Well, thanks for asking. How are you?
Somebody's in the background. It'd perhaps be good if they could just mute if you're not sharing with the group. I think that was a mistake. Okay, brilliant. Right, okay, we've got we're a little bit early today. That's fantastic. So give you all a little bit of time back. So thanks again, everyone, for joining, and look after yourselves. And thanks again, Kanan, for a fantastic session. And we hope to see you again for our remaining sessions as we close out 2023. So thanks again, folks. Take care. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you.